welcome to the Blindfold Chess Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It is puzzle time this week. These are some of my favorite episodes to do. I'm going to give you 3 different puzzles this episode, ranging from easy to hard. I will be giving you the piece location of every piece that is on the board, and it will be your job to figure out the correct sequence of moves to complete the puzzle. So without further ado, let's dive into puzzle number 1. It is white to move, and you are playing white. White has a rook that is on A5. White has a bishop that is on B8. White has a king that is on E2. Black has a king that is on B2. And black has a queen that is on G7. Again, white has a rook that is on A5, a bishop on B8, and a king that is on E2, while black has a king that is on B2 and a queen that is on G7. I will give you a couple of seconds and then we will walk through the solution.
One, bishop to E5 check. Queen captures E5. Two, rook captures E5. White is winning.
This one is a pretty textbook skewer tactic. Black has ever so kindly let their queen on G7 and the king on B2 be on the same diagonal that the bishop on B8 can get to it. After the queen and bishop come off the board, white is up a full rook and will go on to win the game. So congratulations, and let's move on to puzzle number 2. This one is a little bit trickier. Again, you are playing white, and it is white to move. White has a king that is on F4. White has a pawn that is on H2. Black has a king that is on F6, a pawn that is on G6, and a pawn that is on H5. Again, white has a king on F4, a pawn on H2. Black has a king that is on F6, a pawn on G6, and a pawn on H5. I will give you a couple of seconds, and then we will walk through the solution.
One, pawn to H4. Pawn to G5 check. Two, pawn captures G5 check. King G6. Three, king to G3. King captures G5. 4, king to H2. King to G4. 5, king to H1. King to G3. Six, king to G1. Pawn to H4. Seven, king to H1. Pawn to H3. 8, king to G1. Pawn to h2 check. Nine, king to h1. King to h3. Stalemate.
White is down a pawn in this position, but their move of pawn h2 to h4 shuts down Black's pawn majority. Black's only way to make progress is to capture the pawn and to try to win with a rook pawn. This is a good endgame rule. If you are in a king and pawn ending where you are going against a rook pawn and that is the only pawn on the board, your job is to put the king onto the promotion square of the pawn. Once your king is in the corner, your opponent can never get your king out. So in this example, once the pawns are exchanged, White doesn't care about opposition. They want to be on h1 before the Black king can box the White king out of h1. If White can do that, it is a draw. Fun fact, this rule also applies if your opponent has a bishop as well, so long as the bishop is the opposite color of the promotion square. Since your opponent cannot cover all of the squares needed to force the king out, you will be able to secure a draw. A quick example of that, if your king is on a dark square of a1 and White has a light square pawn on a2 and a bishop that is on the a2 to g8 diagonal, which is all light squares, or on the b1 to h7 diagonal, which is also light squares, Black does not have enough firepower to cover the dark squares, allowing White to build up a perpetual home on the a1 and b2 squares, forcing a draw. So with that said, let's move on to puzzle number 3. This one is a hard one, mostly because you're getting dropped into a position from Black's perspective, and there is a large quantity of pieces that are on the board. So in this position, you are playing Black, and it is Black to play. White has a pawn that is on a3, a pawn that is on d4, a pawn on f4, a pawn on g4, a pawn on h6. White also has a rook that is on b3, a rook on g5, and a king that is on e3. Black has a pawn that is on b5, a pawn on d5, a pawn on e4, and Black has a rook on both c4 and a rook on c1. Then the Black king is on c6. Did you get all that? Let's try again. Again, we have white pawns on a3, d4, f4, g4, and h6. And white has rooks on g5 and b3. And white has their king on the e3 square. Black has pawns on b5, d5, and e4. They have rooks on c1 and c4, and a king on c6. Did you get all 14 of those pieces? I will give you a couple of moments, then we will walk through the position. Again, it is Black to move, and you are Black.
Rook 4 to c2. Two, pawn to f5. Rook f1. Three, pawn to h7. Rook f3 checkmate. Black is victorious.
This one is tricky. All of the pawns in the middle of the board are creating a mating net around the white king that he has a very hard time getting out of. The first move of rook 4 to c2 is setting up a checkmate threat against the white king of rook to e1 checkmate, since the d3 and f3 squares are taken out by the black pawn that is on e4, and the white pawns on d4 and f4 are preventing the king from running away. If white tries to give himself some luft with a move like pawn to f5, trying to open up the f4 escape square, black can play rook to f1, circling around the king, with the plans to play rook to f3 checkmate on the next move. White can throw in some spite checks, but they do not change the position as a whole. So, those are your 3 puzzles for this week. I hope you did well, and I hope you learned something along the way. But for now, that is all that we have for this week. Tune in next time, where we will continue to work on our blindfold skills and look at another game of the Masters.